The message arrived at midnight. "Don't count on me in your old age. I'm living my own life and I won't support you." Those words hit me like a sledgehammer, each letter searing into my heart. I read them again and again as if somehow I could make sense of the words that felt like they came from a stranger. This was my son, the boy I raised, loved, and sacrificed for. How could he say this to me? I felt numb. A cold wave of disbelief washed over me. The boy who had once looked up to me, the child I spent countless sleepless nights nurturing, had just told me in black and white that he was done. I didn't know what to feel, anger, hurt, or confusion. All I knew was that I couldn't stay in that moment of vulnerability. I was too proud, too shocked. Instead of answering with words, I simply took a deep breath, then dialed the number of my notary. I was making a decision, one I never thought I'd have to make. As I spoke to the notary, I tried to keep my voice steady. I need to make some changes to my will. I wanted to prepare myself. I didn't know what was going to happen now, but I had to protect what was mine. The next morning, the sun was barely up when I heard the knock on my door. I opened it to find my son standing there, his face a mix of confusion and regret. He didn't speak immediately. Instead, he just stared at me, probably waiting for me to say something, anything. I didn't say a word. My silence hung between us like a thick fog. He looked at me with eyes filled with guilt, his usual confidence now gone. The message he'd sent had left an indelible mark on both of us. But I still had no answers. I wanted to scream, to ask him why, but I just couldn't. Why had he done this? What had I done wrong? I stared at him, wondering if he would speak, or if I would be left to make sense of this alone. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating. My mind drifted back to the years when everything felt simple. When my son was just a child, full of laughter and dreams. Those were the days when I felt like we were invincible. I remember his first day of school, the way he held my hand so tightly as we walked into that classroom. I remember his shy smile when he came home that afternoon, telling me about the friends he had made. I remember the way he looked up at me after a long day, asking me for comfort when the world seemed too big for him. That was my son, the boy who needed me. But now he was standing in front of me, a man who felt like a stranger. I thought about the moments we had shared, the family vacations, the nights we spent laughing over dinner, the way he had once turned to me for advice. But as the years passed, something had changed. His visits became less frequent. The calls slowed down. The once vibrant connection we had seemed to slip away bit by bit. I asked myself, what had happened to my son? What had I missed? There had been small signs at first. A hint of distance, a sense of withdrawal, but I brushed them off. I told myself it was just a phase. He was growing up, becoming independent. He didn't need me as much anymore. I convinced myself that I was doing the right thing by giving him space. But now I realized that the signs had been there all along, and I had ignored them. The night before, as I sat staring at the message, I felt a pang of guilt. Had I failed him? Had I not done enough to keep our bond strong? Was it my fault that my son felt so distant? I wanted to reach out, to pull him back into my arms like when he was a child, but I didn't know how. The hurt from his words still strung, and I didn't know how to fix what had been broken. And then he spoke. "Mom, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you." His voice was soft, but I could hear the underlying frustration. "Why?" I whispered. "Why did you say those things after everything I've done for you?" His eyes avoided mine. He shifted uncomfortably, and for a moment I thought he might walk away again, but instead he took a step closer. I didn't know how else to deal with it. The words felt empty, they didn't explain anything. What could possibly justify his behavior? It was later that morning, after the notary arrived, that the reality of the situation hit me even harder. Sitting at the kitchen table, I had to make a decision I never thought I'd face. What was I supposed to do with my son's betrayal? How could I move forward knowing that the person I had trusted most had just torn our relationship apart? The notary's voice seemed distant as he explained the process, but I heard the words. He told me what I needed to do to revise my will. "It's a simple matter," he said. "You just need to sign these documents." But nothing felt simple. I was signing away part of my future, the future that involved my son. Could I truly take him out of my life like this? Could I sever the ties that had once felt unbreakable? My mind raced, but my hands moved mechanically, signing papers without fully processing what I was doing. My son was watching me, his face unreadable. Then came the knock. It was him again, standing there looking as if he had just realized the gravity of what was happening. "Mom, please," he started, his voice strained. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't speak at first. My heart ached but my mind was set. Was it too late? Could I really forgive him after everything? He stepped forward, his hand reaching for mine. Please, he repeated, his voice breaking. Let me explain. But before I could respond, the phone rang again. I could feel the tension in the room as I answered the call. The notary's voice was urgent. There's something important you need to know, he said. A complication has arisen with your will. My heart skipped a beat. What kind of complication? I asked, my mind racing. It's complicated, he replied, his voice strained. You need to come in as soon as possible. I hung up, my hands trembling. What was going on? What had I missed? I turned to my son, who was looking at me with confusion. What's wrong? He asked. I don't know yet, I said, my voice flat, but something doesn't feel right. We left the house together, driving to the notary's office in silence. I could feel my son's eyes on me, but I didn't turn to look at him. What did he expect me to do? Forgive him just because he was standing there? When we arrived at the notary's office, the man was waiting for us, his face serious. It's about the estate, he said. There's someone else who claims a share in your property, and they have proof. The words hit me like a ton of bricks. Who else could possibly be involved in this? What did they want? My son looked at me, his eyes wide. What does this mean? He asked, panic in his voice. I didn't answer right away. What was going on? Could my son be involved in this somehow? Was there a connection I hadn't seen? As the situation grew more complicated, I began to piece together the puzzle. It wasn't just about the will anymore. It wasn't just about my son's betrayal. Something much darker was at play, and I had to get to the bottom of it. I spent the next few days investigating, trying to understand what had really happened. It wasn't just a simple case of my son rejecting me. No, there was something far deeper, a hidden truth that neither of us had been aware of. In a twist of fate, I discovered that the person who had come forward, claiming rights to my estate, was someone I had never even met, a distant relative I had never heard of. They had proof, and I was left reeling from the revelation. But then my son came to me again, and this time he had the truth. Mom, he began, his voice full of regret, there's something I've been hiding from you. The people who are after us, they're after me. I've made mistakes, and they've been threatening you to get what they want. My heart sank. It wasn't just about him anymore, it was about all of us. The full truth came crashing down, but I knew one thing for certain. My son was in over his head. The consequences of his actions were far greater than I had realized. He had been involved in something illegal, something that had put both of our lives at risk. But there was a silver lining. Through the chaos, I began to see the man he had become, the man who finally understood the weight of his actions. It wasn't too late. Not yet. As I stood there, facing the consequences of our choices, I knew that we had a long road ahead. But we were no longer alone, and together we could face whatever came next. The days blurred together as we faced the mess my son had gotten into. Every time I tried to find a way out, the walls seemed to close in tighter. There were people after him, after us. I couldn't escape the gnawing fear that the life we had built was slipping through my fingers. Every conversation with my son felt like we were walking a tightrope. He would explain his involvement in more detail, but the more he told me, the more confused I became. Who were these people? What had my son really done? I knew he wasn't perfect, but I didn't want to believe he was capable of this kind of danger. The blackmailers were ruthless. They had been sending messages, threatening to hurt us both if we didn't comply with their demands. My son had told me everything, about his dealings with dangerous people, about the things he had done to get in their way. The realization hit me like a cold slap to the face. He had been in too deep for too long. He thought he could fix it himself, but now he was asking for help. I wanted to pull him back, to make him see that he didn't have to walk down this path alone. But at the same time I felt betrayed. All these years I had believed in him, and now I was standing at the edge of a cliff, not knowing if he would pull me down with him. My thoughts were interrupted by a sudden knock at the door. My heart skipped a beat. Who could it be now? The blackmailers? Someone else who wanted to take advantage of the situation? I opened the door to find a man I didn't recognize, tall, with a stern expression on his face. He handed me an envelope without saying a word. When I opened it, my breath caught in my throat. The contents were chilling, proof of the blackmailer's power. They had photos of my son, of me, and they knew things about us that no one should have known. I turned to my son, whose face was now pale. "What is this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't want you to find out this way," he said, his voice shaking. "They've been watching us, waiting for the right moment to strike. I didn't know how to stop it. But now I knew, there was no way out. They were in control and we had no choice but to play their game." I couldn't believe what had happened to us. One wrong turn, and my son had ended up in a world he didn't belong to. A world where people would do anything to get what they wanted. I felt like I was drowning in the weight of it all. The notary's news, the threat from the blackmailers, the sense that my family was falling apart, everything was too much to bear. But I couldn't show weakness. Not now. I had to be strong for him, for us. We had a meeting with the people behind the blackmail, a dangerous group that didn't hesitate to make threats or use violence. They were playing a dangerous game, and now I was tangled in it too. As the meeting drew closer, I could feel my heart pounding. What was I supposed to do? How could I protect my son? How could I protect myself? Everything I thought I knew about our lives seemed like a lie. I looked at my son as we prepared to leave the house. He was wearing a mask of determination, but I could see the fear in his eyes. It was the same fear I felt, only he had lived with it for much longer. "Mom," he said quietly, his voice tight, "I didn't want you to get involved in this, but I can't fix it on my own. I need your help." His words echoed in my mind. I wanted to believe him, wanted to think that he was trying to make it right. But how could I be sure? How could I trust anything he said after all the lies and the hurt? When we arrived at the meeting place, I was on edge. The room was dimly lit, and there were shadows lurking in every corner. My son walked ahead of me, leading the way like he had done this 1,000 times before. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this was the point of no return. If things went wrong here, there would be no going back. The door creaked open and I stepped inside. The air was thick with tension, and then they were there, seated at a long table, their eyes locked on us. I tried to remain calm, but I could feel my heart racing. The leader of the group, a man I had never met, spoke first. "You've been making things difficult for us," he said, his voice low and menacing. "And now we're here to make things right." I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breath. What did he mean by make things right? I couldn't let them control us, but I didn't know how to fight back. And then in that moment of silence, my son spoke up. "I can fix it," he said, his voice steady now like he had a plan, "but I need more time." The next few days were a blur of uncertainty and fear. I wasn't sure if I could trust my son anymore. He had promised me that he was going to fix everything, but how could I believe him? How could I believe that someone who had lied to me so many times was capable of redemption? I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat. The thought of the blackmailers looming over us like a dark cloud was more than I could bear. I had always believed that family was unbreakable, but now I wasn't sure what I had left. In the days that followed, my son continued to tell me about his plan. He assured me that he was going to find a way out, that we would be safe. But the more he spoke, the more I felt the weight of the lies he had told me. How could I trust him? Then came the phone call. It was from the notary. "There's something you need to know," he said, his voice shaky. "I found something in the will, a clause that could change everything." I felt a chill run down my spine. What did he mean? What had I missed? I rushed to the notary's office, hoping that there was some way out. But when I got there, he handed me a piece of paper, an addendum to my will. "This was overlooked," he explained. "It changes the way things are divided. You need to know before it's too late." I read the paper, my mind reeling as I took in the information. It was a secret I hadn't known existed, a truth that could undo everything I had ever believed about my family. The truth was finally laid bare. My son had made a terrible mistake, but it wasn't just his fault. There were forces at play, hidden forces deep in the shadows, that had manipulated him, used him as a pawn in a dangerous game. And now I had to make the hardest decision of my life. Should I forgive him? Could I forgive him? He had hurt me, but in the end he was still my son, and despite everything I still loved him. The phone rang again. This time it was the blackmailers offering an ultimatum. They wanted me to sign over everything I had worked for in exchange for my son's life. But I refused. I couldn't be intimidated anymore. I had spent my whole life taking care of my family, and I wasn't going to let them tear it apart. I turned to my son. "We're going to fix this," I said, my voice strong. "Together." And together we did. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks. There were moments when I thought we wouldn't make it. But in the end, we managed to break free from the blackmailer's grip. And as I looked at my son standing beside me, I realized something important. Love wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up, even when things were hard, even when everything seemed lost. We had faced the darkness together, and we had made it through. Life lessened. Even when betrayal cuts deep, even when it feels like there's no way forward, love can still heal. Family is complicated and trust is fragile, but through honesty, courage, and the willingness to face the truth, healing can happen. It's not about being perfect, it's about being there for each other when it matters most.